Hi, I'm Bob Baulch with the That's Jesus channel. We are in a book study on Earl Irvin West's The Search for the Ancient Order. In the last video, we walked through the early efforts at organization, the dissolution of the Mahoning Association in 1830, the rise of cooperation meetings and the conservative resistance to those, and the founding and the quiet death of the American Christian Bible Society. Today, we're in Volume 1, Chapter 9, and that has the title of the American Christian Missionary Society. So this chapter is about the next attempt at brotherhood-wide organization. It was much bigger than that Bible Society was, and it was much more controversial. And it became the single most important event in the institutional history of the Restoration movement, second only, in the words of one historian, to the founding of Bethany College itself. So, the year 1849, it's a year of growing pains for a young nation and for a young religious movement. Zachary Taylor is president, and the country is tearing itself apart over slavery. Violent debates were thundering in the halls of Congress. Gold had been found in California the year before. 80,000 people were swarming into the new gold fields, and the federal government had laws that could not handle what was happening. That very same week that the brethren met in Cincinnati to decide whether to start a missionary society, California was applying for statehood. These were the days of Webster and Clay and Calhoun and Benton thrilling the people with their speeches. But behind the bright words, the most thoughtful people saw dark days ahead. Slavery was tearing the nation in two. And side by side, the nation and the church were headed for trouble. Neither would soon get over what was coming. By the spring of 1848, Alexander Campbell had been writing essays on church organization for nearly a decade. He felt the groundwork had been laid. He believed the brethren were ready to take a definite step. From all parts of the country, he said, came one general call for more efficient organization of the churches. Now, experience itself was decreeing that the present cooperative system was inadequate. Campbell asked for a national convention then. He suggested in Cincinnati, he suggested October, and he laid out his reasoning carefully. Such a convention should not be a meeting of bookmakers or editors. It should be a true representative body of the brotherhood at large. Messengers, not delegates, messengers sent by the churches themselves, one from every church, if possible. Campbell did not use the term missionary society as the equivalent of his proposed organization. He wanted something broader, an institution that would be missionary and educational and benevolent all at once, something that could take care of all the interests of this church. So, working alongside Campbell was the man who had vowed during his 1845 illness to push the society system among the brethren. We've talked about him before, D.S. Burnet. Now, years later, Burnet would write to W.T. Moore that he considered the founding of the society system one of the most important acts of his career. From the time he urged the scheme of Associated Evangelical Action in 1845 to the present, the work had commanded his heart, his best energies, and his means, his financial means. So Burnet had already founded the American Christian Bible Society 4 years earlier. That society had not gone well. We learned about that in the last chapter, but Burnet was undeterred. He believed that the brethren needed organized institutions to do the work of converting the entire world. And the 1845 convention was the chance to try again on a bigger scale with better unity and with Campbell himself behind it. So here's one of the most curious facts in this whole story that West gives us. When the convention finally met in October 1849, Alexander Campbell wasn't even there. The official reason was illness, but there's no real evidence that Campbell was sick. He was not too sick to keep up his usual duties. West admits that the reason cannot be known for sure, but he raises a strong possibility. By 1849, a mild rumble of complaint against Campbell himself was running through many places in the Brotherhood. There were now 20 to 25 papers being printed by the Brethren. 25 papers by the Restoration Movement churches, individuals in the churches. Campbell had said many times that most of these were not needed, and he opposed a tract society in Cincinnati. He looked with displeasure on schools other than Bethany College. Some brethren accused Campbell of being jealous for his own interests. They wondered if he wanted other papers shut down so that the Millennial Harbinger could have more readers. They wondered if he was against the Cincinnati Tract Society because he wanted Bethany and not Cincinnati to be the center of the movement. Now, some brethren feared that the general organization that Campbell had in mind would become a body that controlled the brotherhood and favored Alexander Campbell himself. Well, Campbell almost certainly knew about these rumblings, and West suggests that Campbell stayed away on purpose. He wanted the new society to be the work of the brethren and not of himself. It's a fascinating possibility to think about. Campbell, who had pushed for a national organization for years, deliberately absent at the very first moment that it was being born so that no one could say that he had forced it on them. Well, the convention met as scheduled in October 1849 as Christian Chapel on the corner of Walnut and 8th Streets in Cincinnati. In Campbell's place came W.K. Pendleton. We learned about him before. Pendleton later wrote about it. He said that he had not met, they had not met to enact ecclesiastical laws. They had not met to interfere with the true and scriptural independence of churches. They had met to consult about the best way to give efficiency to their power and to find methods of cooperation in the great work of converting the entire world. So we're told that many wild schemes were suggested during the meeting and that Pendleton headed them off and steered the convention onto safer ground. He proved to be the clear-headed, cool-headed one in the council, the one to keep the more excitable brethren in check. And the first session was just preliminary. L.L. Pinkerton was elected chair. A committee was appointed to define the order of business. And with that, the first session closed. The next morning, things moved quickly. D.S. Burnet took the chair in Campbell's absence. The question of who counted as a delegate came up. Remember, it's supposed to be messengers and not delegates. The question of voting came up. There was discussion about whether every preacher should automatically be a member by virtue of his office. R.G. Fife of St. Louis strongly objected to that. He feared that the start of clericalism in the church was being mentioned. He feared that it would eventually destroy the equality of the congregations. And so that motion was tabled. And then in the afternoon, John T. Johnson stood up and he offered the resolution that defined the whole movement. Resolved that a missionary society, as a means to concentrate and dispense the wealth and benevolence of the brethren of this Reformation in an effort to convert the world, is both scriptural and expedient. So that's what he offered. One has to wonder about the logic of that resolution. The fact that a convention voted yes or no would not actually settle the question of whether a missionary society was scriptural. What did they have to know about whether it was scriptural or not? You got hundreds of thousands of people that aren't there that might disagree with you. But the resolution passed. A committee was appointed to draft a constitution, and the convention had committed itself. The next day, the Constitution was read article by article. The committee had named the new body the Christian Missionary Society. Walter Scott, he did not love the name. He suggested adding the word American at the front. Well, Scott's suggestion carried, and the new organization was named the American Christian Missionary Society. There were 13 articles in the Constitution. Most of them were procedural, but Article 3 turned out to be the one that mattered the most. Article 3 made membership in the society dependent on the payment of money. Any church could appoint a delegate by giving an annual contribution of $10. $20 paid at one time made a person a lifetime member. $100 paid at one time made a person a life director. Well, this was the chief weakness of the Constitution. The opposition would seize on it again and again in years to come. The argument was straightforward. The Church of Christ does not make membership in anything dependent on the payment of money. To set up an institution that does this is to set up something that is foreign to the New Testament. And once that institution exists, it is no longer accountable to the churches. It is accountable to the people who paid in. But that argument was for later. At the moment, the brethren were elated about this. Officers were elected. Alexander Campbell, in his absence, was named president, of course. 20 vice presidents were chosen, including D.S. Burnet, Walter Scott, T.M. Allen, W.K. Pendleton, John T. Johnson, John O'Kane, and Tolbert Fanning. James Challen was named corresponding secretary. Jesse B. Ferguson was named treasurer. All of these names are important names in the Restoration Movement. And then a motion was made giving brethren in the room the chance to become life members and life directors right then and there. And 52 persons paid $20 and became life members on the spot. 11 paid $100 and became life directors. About $5,000 was raised that one day in money and pledges. So, after the convention, Burnet wrote Campbell a letter informing him that he had been elected president. Burnet expressed sympathy for Campbell's illness, and then he announced what he called a happy issue from their meeting. The convention had lasted a week and filled them all with joy and love. Campbell wrote back that he was peculiarly gratified with the great results. His expectations had been more than realized in this meeting, and he praised the everybody was together, unanimity. I'm going to have to edit this. Probably won't. This is a funny moment. He praised everyone being united and called the convention a happy pledge of good things to come. He said enough had been done at the meeting to occupy their best energies for some time. Bible distribution and evangelical labor, he said, deserved a cordial and generous support. Whether Campbell was entirely pleased, well, that's a different question. The American Christian Missionary Society did not seem to match what he wanted in every detail. He had argued for something broader, a body that would handle missions and education and benevolence all together. He wanted something organized on a truly democratic foundation, on democratic principles. The society that came out of the convention was much more narrow in its scope than that. And its organizers had tried so hard to steer clear of any appearance of ecclesiasticalism that they may have not have built the institution that could really do what Campbell wanted and hoped for it to do. So C.L. Loss, who was deeply involved in the society for the rest of his life, he wrote later that the strictest care was taken throughout the convention never to assume any ecclesiastical privileges. Loss was probably overstating it. The society was almost certainly never as completely free from ecclesiastical authority as his words suggested that it was. So there you go. That's this chapter. One thing before we close, notice what West does with Campbell's absence from the convention. He admits straight up there's no documentary evidence for why Campbell stayed home. Nobody wrote anything about why he stayed at home. But then West proposes a theory. Campbell wanted the society to be the brethren's work and not his work. And he writes that that he doubts not that this is correct. He believes that he's right in this theory. That's a lot of confidence for a guess. A historian working from a different angle might leave that question open or might suggest some other reasons to go along with that guess just to give people a choice. But West is comfortable filling in that silence in Campbell's favor. That is the kind of thing to listen for in a friendly account of a movement. And that's what this book is, a friendly account of the Restoration Movement. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode on the American Christian Missionary Society. Next time, we are in Volume 1, Chapter 10, titled Alexander Campbell and the Missionary Society. If you have the time, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And we always end with the same question: are you trusting something to save you, or are you trusting the Savior? I'm Bob Baulch with the That's Jesus channel. Have a great day and be blessed.